The deal. A human captain buys an alien, but she's not what she seems. The space station hung in the black sky like a glowing spider, its metal arms reaching in all directions. Captain Raylan Cross stepped off his ship, the Night Star, and walked into the heart of the alien bazaar. The air smelled of oil, smoke, and strange spices. Alien voices filled the air, talking, arguing, trading. Raylan wasn't here to buy anything. He just wanted to stretch his legs, maybe get a drink. But then he heard a whisper from a trader behind a dark curtain. "You want something rare, human. Something alive." Raylan stopped. "What do you mean?" The trader pulled back the curtain. Inside stood a girl, tall, thin, with silvery skin and glowing blue eyes. She looked calm, but something about her made Raylan freeze. She wasn't scared. She wasn't crying. She was just watching. "She's a servant," the trader said. "Obedient, quiet, smart. From the edge of the Zenthuri Nebula." Raylan frowned. He hated slave trading, but the law here allowed it. He knew many alien races still saw it as normal. Humans didn't, but interfering would get him banned, or worse. Still, something about the girl. "How much?" Raylan asked. The trader smiled. 10,000 credits. Final price. Raylan was about to say no, but the girl looked into his eyes, and in that moment, he saw something strange. Not fear, not sadness. Something deeper. Strength. Maybe even royalty. "My name is Lyra," she said softly. "Please, take me." Raylan felt a chill. He couldn't explain it, but he nodded and paid the credits. Back on the ship, Raylan gave her a room. It wasn't big, but it was clean. She didn't speak much, just nodded and thanked him. She moved quietly, always watching everything. The ship's AI, Echo, scanned her. "Captain," Echo said, "she has strange energy readings. No known match in the database." Raylan raised an eyebrow. Dangerous. Unknown. That night, Raylan checked the trade records. The seller had no history, no name, just a fake ID. And the file on Lyra was empty. No planet of origin. No species name. Nothing. He walked to her room and found her sitting by the small window, looking out at the stars. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She turned to him. "Yes, Captain. Why were you for sale?" Lyra looked down. "Because I ran away." "From what?" She didn't answer. The next day, strange things started happening. The ship's sensors picked up another vessel following them. It didn't answer any messages. It just stayed close. Lyra stayed calm. She cleaned the ship, helped Echo, cooked meals. But Raylan noticed she never slept. And once, he saw her hand glow faintly when she touched the control panel. "Echo," Raylan said, "is she using the ship systems?" "Not directly. But her energy is interacting with our tech, almost like she's part of it." Raylan decided to talk to her again. "You're not just a servant, are you?" he asked. Lyra looked at him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "You didn't buy a servant, Captain. You bought a secret." That night, alarms screamed across the ship. "Unknown vessel approaching fast," Echo warned. "Weapons locked. Shields up." Raylan rushed to the control room. On the screen was a large alien ship. No markings, no ID. Lyra stood beside him, calm as always. "They found me," she said. "Who?" She turned to him, her eyes glowing again, brighter this time. "My people. Or rather, my enemies." Raylan stared at her. "Who are you really?" She gave a small smile. "If I tell you, your life will change. Forever." Outside, the enemy ship powered up weapons. Inside, Raylan's heart raced. Who was this girl? What had he really brought onto his ship? And why? Did he feel like the entire galaxy was about to turn upside down? The chase begins. The stars outside flickered like tiny fires, but Captain Raylan Cross wasn't looking at them. His eyes were on the girl. No, the alien, sitting across from him in the control room. Lyra, the servant he had traded for just days ago. She stared at the screen showing the enemy ship. It was massive, sleek, quiet, and dangerous. "They're not here to talk," Lyra said softly. "They're here to take me back, or kill me." Raylan leaned forward. "You need to start telling me the truth. Who are you?" Lyra didn't answer right away. Her hands were folded in her lap, her expression calm. But there was tension in her eyes, like someone holding back a storm. "I ran away from my homeworld," she said finally. "It's far from here. Hidden. Our people don't usually leave. It's forbidden. But I had to." "Why?" "Because I'm not just a servant. I was never a servant. I am." She paused, then shook her head. "Doesn't matter. You wouldn't believe me." Before Raylan could reply, Echo interrupted. "Captain, unknown vessel is accelerating. They've launched a probe. It's scanning our ship." Raylan jumped into the pilot's seat. "Raise shields. Prepare evasive maneuvers." The Night Star jolted as the enemy probe struck their hull. Not a weapon, just a signal. It scanned them deeply, searching. Then it stopped. The enemy ship sent a message. One line. "Surrender the girl, or be destroyed." Raylan turned to Lyra. "Are you worth starting a war over?" She gave him a sad smile. "I'm afraid I might be." Raylan made a decision. Echo. Jump to hyperspace. Random coordinates. Coordinates scrambled. Initiating jump in 3, 2, 1. The stars stretched and blurred as the ship tore through space. But peace didn't last long. The Night Star dropped out of hyperspace into a red-colored system filled with debris and quiet moons. But within seconds, a signal appeared again. Same ship, still chasing. Raylan slammed his fist on the console. "They followed us through a blind jump." "How?" Echo replied. "Unknown technology, possibly tracking Lyra herself." Raylan looked at her. "Are you carrying a tracker?" "No," Lyra said. "Not on my body. But..." She stood, moved to the cargo hold, and reached into a small bag she had carried from the auction. Inside, hidden beneath clothes, was a glowing crystal, deep blue, with tiny lights dancing inside. "This is royal property," she said. "It connects me to my family. To my throne." Raylan froze. "Throne?" Lyra met his eyes. "I am Princess Lyra of the Xanthari Empire. Or, I was." She told him everything. The Xanthari Empire was old, powerful, hidden from most of the galaxy. While humans were still building their first starships, her people were already shaping stars. But the empire was falling apart. Her uncle had taken control after the death of her mother, the queen. He wanted war. He wanted slaves. He wanted to rebuild the empire into something darker. Lyra was next in line, but she refused to rule a kingdom built on blood. So she ran, disguised herself, and vanished. "I thought if I gave myself up, maybe they'd stop hunting me," she said. "But I see now, they won't stop. Not until I'm dead or controlled." Raylan stood silent. A princess. He had traded for a princess. "You should have told me," he said. "You would have turned me in." Raylan raised an eyebrow. "Maybe, or maybe I'd have asked for a raise." She smiled at that. But the smile faded fast. Echo's voice returned, sharp. "Captain, a second ship has arrived. Smaller, faster. They are surrounding us." Raylan sighed. "Great. Royal welcoming party." They had only one chance. Raylan turned to Lyra. "You know their tech. You know their tactics. Can you help me fly this thing like they won't expect?" She nodded. "If you trust me." He paused, looked her in the eyes, and said, "I just jumped into hyperspace to save a runaway alien princess. Yeah, I think I trust you." Together, they ran to the controls. The next few minutes were chaos. The Night Star twisted through the asteroid field near a dead moon. Enemy ships fired, missing by inches. Echo shouted warnings. Raylan steered, and Lyra sent false signals, messing with their targeting systems. "We need somewhere to hide," Raylan said. "There's a storm belt near the planet below," Lyra said quickly. "Magnetic fields will block their scans." The Night Star dove. The electric clouds filled the sky. Blue lightning cracked around them. The ship shook. "Echo, hold her together," Raylan yelled. "Trying, Captain," but she wasn't built for royal chases. They made it, barely. Inside the storm, the scanners went quiet. The enemy ships searched above but couldn't see them anymore. Inside the quiet ship, Raylan finally sat down. Lyra leaned against the wall, tired but calm. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not turning me in. For risking your life." Raylan looked at her, thinking of all the trouble she'd brought him. "You still haven't answered my first question," he said. She tilted her head. "Why did you ask me to take you that day? Out of all the people at the auction." Lyra looked out at the lightning beyond the window. "Because you didn't look at me like I was property. You looked at me like I was real." Secrets of the Throne. Captain Raylan Cross didn't trust many things in the galaxy. Aliens, politicians, synthetic coffee. But somehow he was starting to trust her. Lyra. The girl he thought was a servant. Now he knew the truth. She was a runaway princess from a powerful hidden empire. And someone wanted her back. Badly. The Night Star was hiding inside the storm belt of a dying planet. It wasn't much of a plan. Just a pause. A place to breathe. But they didn't get long. "Captain," Echo said. "New signal detected. No weapons. Civilian ship." Raylan frowned. "Put it on screen." The ship was small, gold-colored, shaped like a folded bird. Elegant. Royal. Familiar. Lyra stood up fast. "That's a palace craft. My people." Raylan grabbed his blaster. "Friend or foe?" Lyra's face was unreadable. "I don't know." The palace ship didn't attack. Instead, it sent a message. "To Princess Lyra of Zenthori, we are not your enemies. The Queen Mother lives. Please return with us. The Empire needs you." Raylan looked at Lyra. "Thought your mother was dead." Lyra's hands trembled slightly. "So did I." She walked to the comm screen and pressed a button. A hologram appeared, an older alien woman with the same silver skin and glowing eyes. She looked tired, hurt, but alive. "My daughter," she said. "We were told you were dead. I've waited so long. Please, come home." Raylan narrowed his eyes. Could be a trick. Lyra was shaking now. "I need to know the truth." Before Raylan could stop her, she stepped onto the palace ship. Raylan waited, watched, paced, then waited some more. Minutes passed, then an hour. Then Echo spoke. "Captain, that ship just jumped to light speed. They took her." Raylan slammed his fist on the wall. Of course they did. He ran to the cockpit. Tracked them. Already on it. Plotting course now. Inside the palace ship, Lyra sat in silence. The halls were golden and cold, filled with symbols from her childhood. Guards in silver armor watched her every move. A tall figure stepped forward. Her cousin Callan. Sharp jaw. Cold eyes. The new prince of the Empire. "Welcome home, cousin," he said. "You've caused quite a mess." Lyra stood tall. "Where is my mother?" Callan smirked. "Safe. For now." He leaned closer. "You think running to the humans was smart. You think hiding in their dirty backwater ships would protect you. I wasn't hiding. I was choosing freedom." Callan laughed. "You had no right to leave. You were born to rule." "No, I was born to change things. You only want power." He turned to the guards. "Take her to the memory room. Let her remember who she is." Back on the Night Star, Raylan followed their trail to a hidden system, one not listed in any human maps. The palace ship had landed on a massive orbital city that looked more like a floating temple. Raylan flew in dark. No weapons, just guts. Echo warned him. Infiltration risk, 98%. Odds of death, 93%. Raylan shrugged. Still better than my dating life. He docked the ship quietly and slipped into the city. Inside, Lyra sat alone in a tall white room filled with ancient images floating in the air. Her family, her home, her training, all the things she had run from. Her mother entered slowly. "You really are alive," Lyra whispered. The queen walked forward, eyes soft. "And so are you." They embraced. But Lyra pulled back. "Then why lie? Why say I was dead? Why chase me?" The queen looked away. "Because if Kalen took the throne before you returned, he would have destroyed anyone in his way." Lyra's heart ached. So this was all politics. "No," her mother said. It was survival. Meanwhile, Raylan disguised himself in stolen guard armor and moved through the palace. He hacked into a terminal using Echo's help and found Lyra's location. "Level 9. Royal Wing," Echo said. But Raylan wasn't alone. As he turned a corner, he was spotted. "Stop!" shouted two Xanthari guards. Raylan fired a stun shot and ran. The palace shook with alarms. Lyra turned toward the noise. She saw her mother stiffen. "Who's here?" Lyra asked. The queen sighed. "Your human friend, I assume. Brave, but foolish." Lyra smiled just a little. "He always is." Raylan reached the royal wing and kicked open the door to the memory room. Lyra spun around in shock. "You came," she said. "You really thought I'd let some space prince steal my crew member?" Raylan grinned. But before they could leave, Kalen appeared with 10 armed guards. "Raylan Cross," Kalen said coldly. "You've broken into the royal city of Xanthari. That is an act of war." Raylan raised his blaster. "Add it to my resume." But before anyone could fire, Lyra stepped forward. Her voice was steady. "No one dies today." She raised her hand, and it glowed with blinding white energy. The floor trembled. The air cracked. The royal guards dropped their weapons. Kalen backed away. "What are you doing?" "I'm taking back what's mine," she said. Raylan and Lyra ran through the chaos, blasting out of the palace in a stolen shuttle. As they flew toward the Night Star, Lyra looked at him. "You really are the dumbest, bravest human I've ever met." Raylan smirked. "And you're the most dangerous servant I've ever bought." She laughed for the first time. But it faded fast. Echo's voice crackled through the comms. "Captain, incoming royal broadcast, Empire-wide, from Kalen." Raylan and Lyra watched the message appear. Kalen's cold face filled the screen. "This is Prince Kalen of Xanthari. The traitor Lyra has returned. She is to be captured on sight. Anyone who helps her will face destruction." Power unleashed. The stolen shuttle shook as it flew through the edge of Xanthari space. Explosions flashed in the distance. Enemy ships had spotted them, but the Night Star was close now. Inside the shuttle, Lyra sat in silence. Her hands glowed faintly with white energy. Her breathing was calm, but her heart raced. Raylan glanced at her, gripping the controls tightly. "So, just checking, are you secretly a god too, or just a space princess with magic powers?" Lyra gave a small smile. "It's not magic. It's ancestral energy. A gift, passed through bloodlines. Most Xanthari don't use it anymore. But you do. Only when I have no choice." Outside, the enemy fighters closed in. "Okay," Raylan muttered. "Now would be a great time for one of those no-choice moments." The enemy ships locked weapons. Raylan swerved the shuttle hard, dodging blasts. The shields sparked and flickered. They were too slow, too exposed. Then Lyra stood. She opened the side hatch and stepped near the edge, holding onto the railing. "Are you insane?" Raylan shouted. "You'll get sucked into space." She didn't answer. Her eyes glowed. Her entire body lit up like a burning star. She raised one hand, and the sky bent. The first enemy ship spiraled out of control. The second exploded into flame. The others pulled back, sensors overloaded by the raw pulse of energy coming from her body. Raylan's mouth dropped open. "Okay, that's new." Lyra collapsed into the co-pilot seat, exhausted. "I can't do that again," she whispered. "You won't have to," Raylan said. "We're home." The Night Star appeared in front of them. Its hangar door opened like a welcoming mouth. Once aboard, Echo scanned them. "Captain, Princess Lyra's energy levels are unstable. Recommend rest and isolation." "She just saved our lives," Raylan said. "She's earned a nap and a snack." As Lyra rested, Raylan walked to the control deck. The royal broadcast still played across the galaxy. "Lyra is a traitor," Kalen's voice echoed. "A danger to our empire. She has betrayed the bloodline. She hides with humans. Anyone seen helping her will be destroyed." Raylan turned the screen off. He clenched his jaw. "If they want war, they'll get it." Lyra awoke hours later in the medbay. Echo dimmed the lights for her comfort. Raylan sat beside her, drinking the worst coffee in 5 sectors. "You should be asleep," she said softly. Raylan grinned. "Can't sleep. Galactic bounty on my head. Princess glowing like a light bulb. War knocking on my door. You know, usual stuff." She sat up. "You should leave me behind. You don't owe me anything." "Wrong," Raylan said. "Your crew. That means we face this together." She looked at him for a long time, then nodded. "Then let's fight back." Raylan sent a signal across human space. He called in favors from old friends, smugglers, exiles, and rogue captains, people who owed him, or just hated tyrants. Within 2 days, 5 ships arrived, beat up, scratched, but loyal. Lyra stepped into the meeting room. Her silver cloak shimmered. Her presence silenced the room. "We are not strong alone," she began. "But together, we are the beginning of something powerful. My cousin rules with fear. I will not. I will fight with honor. With allies. With you." A silence. Then one smuggler stood. "I heard what she did to those royal ships. I'll follow her." Another added, "If she stands with humans, then I stand with her." And just like that, she had a fleet. Small, yes, but brave. Over the next few days, Lyra trained the crews. She taught them Zentheri tactics, hand-to-hand combat, energy reading, how to move as one. Raylan watched in amazement. She was born to rule, but more than that, she was born to lead. She didn't shout. She didn't demand. She inspired. Late one night, Raylan stood beside her on the observation deck. "You ever miss it?" he asked. "Being home." Lyra stared into the stars. "I miss who I used to be. Before all this. Before war. Before thrones." He nodded. "If I had a crown, I'd pawn it for parts." She laughed. A real laugh this time. Light and warm. But peace didn't last. Echo sounded an alert. "Captain. New fleet detected near the human Zentheri border. Royal flagship confirmed. Kalen is moving toward Earth." Raylan's jaw tightened. He's not just after her anymore. Lyra stepped forward. "He wants to punish humanity for helping me." "Then we hit first," Raylan said, "where it hurts." The plan was dangerous. Insane. But it might work. They would fly to the edge of the Zentheri capital, sneak inside through old royal tunnels known only to Lyra, and confront Kalen during his secret war meeting. Raylan wasn't sure they'd survive. But when Lyra looked at him and said, "We end this together," he believed they had a chance. The next morning, the fleet left human space. Lyra sat in her chair on the bridge of the Night Star, no longer a passenger, now a commander. Her silver eyes glowed softly. Her voice rang clear over the comms. "This is Princess Lyra of Zenthari. I return not to beg, but to change the future. If you stand for peace, for freedom, for truth, stand with me." Raylan leaned back in his seat, smiling. "Let's go crash a royal party. War plans." The stars were quiet, but everyone on the Night Star knew what was coming. War. Captain Raylan Cross stood in the command deck, arms crossed, staring at the holomap floating above the table. Blinking red lights showed enemy patrols. Blue lights, just a few, marked friendly ships. And at the center of it all, in bright gold, floated their target, the Royal Palace ship, Zenith Prime. Floating fortress, home of the Zenthari Empire, and current throne of Prince Callan. Raylan looked around the room. His crew, smugglers, exiles, old rebels, and her, Lyra, princess, warrior, leader. He pointed to the glowing palace. "That's where this ends." Lyra stepped forward. She wore a dark suit lined with silver. Her royal crest was visible now. She no longer hid who she was. "The palace is protected by shields. Normal attacks won't work. But there's a weakness, an old tunnel beneath the throne chamber, a secret escape path known only to the royal bloodline." "You sure it still exists?" one smuggler asked. Lyra nodded. "I used it once, when I was a child." Raylan smirked. "Let's hope your memory's good. Otherwise we'll be royalty-flavored toast." The room chuckled. Tension eased a little. Then Lyra's face turned serious. "This isn't just about me. Callan wants to invade Earth, destroy human cities, turn them into labor camps. He wants to break the alliance between humans and the rest of the galaxy." She paused, looked each person in the eyes. "We are not here to destroy an empire. We are here to stop a tyrant and build something better." For the next 2 days, the rebels trained. Ships were repaired, weapons checked, messages sent to other systems, hidden allies who still remembered the old queen, Lyra's mother. Some sent support, a few ships, supplies, information. Raylan noticed Lyra didn't rest. She worked late into the night, walking through the ship, helping with repairs, giving courage to the crew. She remembered every name, spoke with kindness. Even the grumpiest smugglers started calling her commander with respect. "You were born for this," Raylan told her one night. She looked at him. "So were you." He laughed. "Me? I'm just a tired cargo runner who made a dumb trade. That trade may have saved the galaxy." On the day of the attack, their small fleet jumped into Zenthari space, just outside the reach of palace sensors. The capital system was massive. Dozens of royal ships patrolled the skies. Giant banners floated in space, showing Callan's face. "Arrogant jerk," Raylan muttered, already acting like a god. "Target, Zenith Prime located," Echo reported. "Status, fully shielded. Defenses at 98%. "Perfect," Raylan said. "Just how we like it." The plan was simple. Create a distraction. The rebel ships would attack the outer fleet and fake a retreat. That would pull Callan's guards away from the palace. Raylan, Lyra, and a small strike team would sneak in through the old royal tunnel beneath the palace. Lyra would confront Callan before he could activate the throne's power core, an ancient device said to give the ruler control over planetary systems. If Callan activated it, he'd become nearly unstoppable. They had one chance. The battle started fast. Raylan watched from the cockpit as ships exploded in every direction. His crew flew through the chaos, dodging blasts and pretending to flee. It worked. Enemy ships followed, chasing them far from the palace. "Tunnel should be open now," Lyra said. They flew the Night Star close to a moon on the edge of the palace. Hidden beneath its surface was an ancient gate, long forgotten. Lyra placed her glowing hand on a stone panel. The rock slid open, revealing a tunnel made of blue metal and golden veins. Raylan whistled. Your people really know how to build secret doors. Inside the tunnel, it was quiet. Too quiet. They moved quickly, flashlights on, weapons ready. Raylan noticed strange carvings on the walls, symbols of peace, unity, and balance. Not the empire Kaylin now ruled. Lyra touched one of the walls. My mother built this tunnel herself. She believed in change, in peace with the outside world. Raylan nodded. Then we finish what she started. They reached the end of the tunnel. A metal gate blocked the way. Lyra opened it with her blood, a small drop on a golden lock. The door opened. They stepped into the throne chamber. It was huge, tall pillars, floating lights, and at the center, on a high platform, stood Kaylin, dressed in royal armor, glowing with dark energy. Well, well, he said, the lost princess returns. He smiled at Raylan. And the human pet too. Raylan raised his blaster. You talk too much. Kaylin held up a hand. Raylan's blaster was ripped from his grip by invisible force. Don't worry, Kaylin said. You'll die quickly. He turned to Lyra. But you'll watch everything fall. Lyra stepped forward, no fear in her eyes. This ends now. Kaylin laughed. You can't stop me. The core is ready. Once I connect with it, I will control the stars. Lyra raised her hands. Energy glowed around her. White light crackled from her fingers. Then we fight. Kaylin charged. Their battle was like nothing Raylan had ever seen. Light against darkness. Kaylin used raw power. Brutal, loud, wild. He blasted walls, cracked the floor, turned air to fire. Lyra was precise, fast, focused. Each movement felt like music. She blocked his attacks, countered with energy pulses, and moved with purpose. Raylan dove for cover, helping disable the control panels connected to the power core. Kaylin saw this. You think she's strong? He roared. She's weak. She ran away. Raylan shouted back. She came back. That makes her braver than you'll ever be. Kaylin roared and sent a final blast toward Lyra. But she caught it midair and turned it back. A wave of blinding light filled the throne room. When it cleared, Kaylin lay on the floor. Defeated, Lyra walked to the throne. But instead of sitting down, she turned to her crew. I don't need a throne to lead. She raised her hand and disabled the core. The palace fell silent. Then cheers broke out across the comms. The battle outside had stopped. Centauri ships powered down. Across the system, screens showed Lyra's face. Not as a servant, not as a runaway, but as the true ruler of the Empire. Battle for the Empire. The throne room was quiet now. Kaylin lay on the floor, unconscious, his dark armor cracked and sparking. The glow of his stolen power had faded. Smoke drifted through the air. Cracks ran across the floor like veins of a dying world. And in the center stood Lyra. She didn't wear a crown. She didn't sit on the throne. But everyone in the room knew who was in charge. Raylan stepped beside her, dust on his coat, his hair singed. You good? She nodded, breathing slowly. I'm not hurt. You sure? You just blasted your cousin across the galaxy. Lyra gave a tired smile. He deserved it. Outside the palace, Centauri warships hovered in silence. Their crews had seen the fight broadcast live across all systems. It was tradition. Any royal challenge to the throne had to be shown publicly, by law. And now the law had spoken. Lyra had won. But victory was never simple. Echo's voice crackled through Raylan's wrist comm. Captain. Incoming fleet. Not Centauri. Raylan frowned. Who is it? Mixed signatures. Human. Mercenary. Unknown alien craft. Estimated. 200 ships. Lyra turned, eyes narrowing. That doesn't make sense. Kaylin had no outside allies. Then the palace comm systems lit up. A chilling voice echoed through every chamber. "This is Admiral Vorn of the Targan Dominion. We come to collect our payment." Raylan muttered, "Of course. There's always another enemy." Lyra stepped back from the throne. Vorn was an outlaw. Kalen must have promised him something. Echo continued scanning. "Greater than Dominion fleet outguns us 4-1. Raylan looked at Lyra. "You're the queen now. What do we do?" She didn't blink. "We fight." All across the Zenthari system, confusion spread. Loyalists to Lyra, supporters of Kalen, some just afraid of the Dominion's firepower. Raylan and Lyra moved fast. They activated old defense stations, sent calls to the rebel fleet, reached out to old allies in nearby systems. But time was short. Within an hour, the Targan Dominion arrived in orbit, ships spread wide like the jaws of a beast. Admiral Vorn appeared on every Zenthari screen. "Turn over the palace. Turn over the girl, or we burn your empire down." Lyra stood tall on the palace broadcast deck. She looked into the camera. Calm. Strong. "This is Lyra of Zenthari. You want a throne. Come take it. But know this, you will not find a frightened girl. You will find a people ready to rise." Her words spread across the empire, and something began to shift. Old ships powered up. Forgotten stations blinked online. Civilians began evacuating cities close to the capital, offering their homes as command posts and supply hubs. The people weren't just watching anymore. They were joining. Raylan stood by Lyra as the battle plan unfolded. The Night Star would lead the inner assault, fast, sharp, aiming straight for the Dominion flagship. The Zenthari fleet would hold the defensive line, protecting the cities. Ground teams would secure the palace and shield the power core from being reactivated. "Are you ready?" Lyra asked. Raylan smiled. "I was born ready. Well, maybe not born, but definitely trained by panic and bad decisions." She laughed once, and then they launched. The skies above the Empire turned to fire. Dominion ships opened fire with plasma beams and torpedoes. Zenthari vessels responded with ion cannons and swarm missiles. The Night Star danced between cruisers, flying dangerously close, dodging blasts with impossible turns. Inside the ship, Raylan barked orders. "Echo, bring up the rear shields." "Already done, Captain. Try not to fly us into a sun." Lyra focused, her hands on a control panel wired directly into the palace defense grid. She called out ship positions, redirected energy shields, guided troops on the ground. She wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was the commander. The battle reached its peak when 3 Dominion dreadnoughts pushed through the front line. Their path aimed straight at the capital city, home to millions. "We can't stop them," cried one pilot over comms. Lyra stood at the edge of the command deck, her eyes glowing again. "I can." Raylan knew what was coming. "Lyra, no, if you push your power again, you cooled." But she was already moving. She stepped into the energy transfer station, a place where royal bloodlines could connect to the ancient systems buried beneath the palace. She placed her hands on the control node. The entire sky lit up. From the heart of the palace, a pulse spread outward, a wave of white-blue light that raced across the system. Dominion ships faltered. Their targeting systems shut down. Engines flickered. The dreadnoughts froze mid-flight, then exploded, one by one, without firing another shot. On the Night Star, Raylan shielded his eyes. When the light faded, Lyra collapsed. He caught her just in time. "Lyra, stay with me." She blinked up at him, weak but alive. "I had to protect them," she whispered. "You did," he said. "You saved them all." Hours later, the Targan Dominion surrendered. Their surviving ships jumped away in retreat. Across the galaxy, their name began to lose its fear. Inside the palace, Lyra stood once again before the throne. This time, the chamber was filled. Zenthari citizens, rebel fighters, former enemies, now standing together. She didn't wear a crown. She wore a flight jacket, grease on her sleeves, dirt on her boots, and a fire in her eyes. "I will not rule from above you," she said. "I will walk beside you." Later that evening, Raylan stood on the edge of the palace platform, watching the stars. Ships buzzed around the sky like fireflies. Lyra stepped beside him, holding 2 mugs. "Still don't like royal food," she said, handing him one. "But this tea's not bad." Raylan took a sip. "Still prefer coffee, even the terrible kind." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Lyra asked, "Do you ever regret it?" "What?" "Buying me that day. Making the deal." Raylan looked at her. "You weren't a deal. You were a turning point." She smiled. And for the first time in a long time, the stars above the Empire shined with peace. Queen of 2 worlds, a new dawn rose over the twin suns of Zenthuri Prime. In the heart of the capital, the Empire's ancient banners were being taken down. Not torn, folded, carefully, respectfully. Symbols of old power making way for something new. Princess Lyra stood on the royal balcony, watching her people below. Ships hovered in formation. Civilians walked freely in the open sky plazas. Children played where guards once stood with rifles. But her eyes weren't on the crowd. They were on the message in her hand. A transmission. From Earth. Inside the royal chamber, Captain Raylan Cross paced in front of a large screen. "Is this real?" he asked. Echo responded. "Confirmed. Transmission came from Earth's Interstellar Council. High alert. All major cities preparing for defense." Raylan shook his head. "They think Lyra's new army is coming to attack." "Their trust is unstable," Echo said. "Some still believe the Zenthuri are an enemy force." Raylan rubbed his face. "After everything we did, they still think she's a threat." The door opened behind him. Lyra stepped in, calm and quiet. "I saw the message," she said. Raylan looked at her. "Earth's scared. They saw what you did to the Dominion fleet. They think you're too powerful." Lyra nodded. "Maybe they're right." He stepped toward her. "You saved them. You saved everyone." "I also bent the sky with my hands and made warships explode," she said softly. "Humans fear what they don't understand, just like my people once did." Raylan went quiet. Then Lyra added, "Earth is calling for a meeting. One that could end in peace or end in guns." Later that day, the Empire's High Council gathered. Nobles, scientists, warriors, civilians. The room was filled with voices. Some wanted revenge. Others wanted peace. Many were still unsure. "This is our moment," one elder said. "We should show them Zenthuri strength." "We just defeated the Dominion," said another. "If we attack Earth now, the galaxy will see us as tyrants." Lyra stood silently at the head of the table. Then she raised her hand, and the room fell quiet. "I know what war brings," she said. "I've seen it, felt it, caused it." She looked around the table. "And I know what fear can do. But this is our chance to build something different. If we choose violence now, we become everything Callan wanted." An old noble stood. "But what if Earth starts the war?" Lyra didn't blink. "Then I'll stand between their bullets and our people. But I won't fire first." The council voted. Peace talks would begin. The next day, the Night Star left Zenthuri space. It wasn't a warship. It wasn't guarded. It was just Raylan, Lyra, and a small crew on a mission of peace. The closer they got to Earth, the more tense the air became. Human ships scanned them constantly. Warnings played on every channel. "Approach with caution. Weapons offline. No sudden movements." Raylan leaned over the controls. "You'd think we were flying a bomb, not a princess." Lyra didn't smile. She was focused. "They don't see me as a princess," she said. "They see me as a weapon." The Night Star landed on Earth. The welcome was cold. No cheering crowds. No music. Just soldiers, weapons, nervous eyes. A man in a gray suit approached, Earth's Interstellar Council leader. He nodded at Raylan. Captain. Then he turned to Lyra. Your Highness. Lyra bowed slightly. Thank you for agreeing to meet. The council leader didn't smile. Let's see if it was the right decision. Inside the human council chamber, the tension was thick. Screens around the room showed clips of Lyra's battle with Kellen. The energy blasts, the Dominion ships exploding, her glowing eyes. A general stood up. You expect us to believe this power will never be used against us? Lyra replied calmly. I didn't destroy ships. I destroyed invaders. I saved lives. Another council member asked, if a new war begins, will you stay out of it, or choose a side? Raylan stood. She already chose. She chose people over thrones, peace over power. She could have ruled alone, but she didn't. The general frowned. And you? What do you get out of this alliance? Raylan smiled. The satisfaction of being right. Also maybe some coffee that doesn't taste like engine oil. A few members laughed. The tension cracked slightly. Then Lyra spoke again. Zenthari power should not rule the stars. It should protect them. And if you'll have me, I offer our hand in peace. Silence. Then the council voted. One by one, lights turned green. Peace accepted. Days later, Earth and the Zenthari Empire signed a new alliance treaty. Trade routes reopened. Joint patrols were planned. Technology shared. Lyra stood at the ceremony, her silver cloak flowing behind her. Raylan stood beside her, looking strangely uncomfortable in a clean jacket. You clean up well, Lyra teased. Raylan tugged at the collar. It itches. I'm gonna throw this thing out an airlock. She smiled. You know, you could stay. Raylan blinked. On Earth. No, she said. On both worlds. Later that night, on the Night Star, they stood alone at the window, staring at Earth's moon. So what now? Raylan asked. Lyra thought for a moment. I'll rule, but not from a palace. I'll travel, meet people, fix what the Empire broke. And you? Raylan raised an eyebrow. Yeah, you'll fly with me. He chuckled. Princess makes a fine co-pilot. She looked at him, serious now. Raylan, you didn't just help me survive. You helped me become who I was meant to be. He smiled. You weren't a servant in disguise. You were a queen in hiding. The stars outside blinked, quiet and full of promise. Two worlds, once strangers, once enemies, now stood side by side. Because one human made a trade. Because one girl believed in freedom. Because one choice changed everything.